welcome everyone. Woo!
Exactly. So first of all, welcome everybody and thank you for joining today. It's during your lunchtime, so it's great. It's the second Women in Digital Switzerland Lunch and Learn. So we are very happy. As you are here, you know what we will discuss today. So they are Stars&Scars of digital transformation. We are so lucky because we have Sonia, we have Kelly. I think the most of you already know them. Anyway, I will introduce them a little bit and they will introduce themselves too. So, voilà. You don't know me. I'm Sarah and I am a co-host of Untitled Chapter. I will moderate the meetup today, as you probably understood. Let me say just 2 words about Sangal. If you live in the area, sign up. So maybe, as Kelly was saying, so there will be no more COVID, we hope so. And if you can join us in the Sangalip office, and it would be great to see you all and see your face finally. Before we start with the speakers, I would like just to check with you some administration. Most of you already know Zoom because you use the chat, but you also have a Q&A. So all questions, please ask them in the Q&A. Use the Q&A. You are so lucky today because you have 2 speakers and they're happy to answer all your questions. So don't be ashamed, don't feel shy. Just go Q&A, ask everything. And how we will do it today, first we will listen to the presentation, obviously, and then there will be the famous Q&A. So as I told you, add your question. Anyway, enough speaking about administration and everything. So let's go to introduce the agenda and the speakers. Voila. So we have the agenda. We already did the welcome. Check. Introduction. Almost done. Check. So obviously, Sonia will speak about the NGO sector and Kelly will speak about the private sector for the digital transformation. Then they will be they will bring everything together, obviously, and then there will be the famous Q&A. Remember, ask because this is your occasion. Okay, so this is a little bit everything. Just let me introduce a little bit the speakers. So I will start with Kelly. Most of you already know it because you are in Women in Digital. So Kelly is the Director of Digital Transformation Strategy and Service at Sunstar. So is a global leader for oral care. And she's, as the title says, she's leading the digital transformation there. So, okay, Kelly is much more than, she does so much also for the community. She has plus to her professional skills than she's used it. She's passionate about community building. Women in Digital is obviously an example. She founded Dropping Digital, co-founded Women in Digital Switzerland, thank you, and owner of Community Workshop, then is based in Lausanne. What else? I think that is everything about Kelly.
Perfect.
Let me introduce Sonia. So Sonia is the head of digital transformation at Médecins Sans Frontières. She's responsible not for 1 but 2 programs. This is something that shocked me a bit. I was like, you're busy 24/7. And so for the medical and logistic department, if I'm right, and she dedicated the past 15 years of her life to nonprofit organizations. She has worked for very, very well-known organizations, not just Médecins Sans Frontières, but for example, Global Fund. She has a computer science background and this is super interesting for me. She was also adjunct professor at the Kent State University, where she introduced the first non-profit practical, I can do it, non-profit practical course. Yeah, I did it, I said it. So thank you so much to both of you. And I will let you speak. I mean, it's more important what you will say now. Thank you so much.
Great. Well, thank you, Sarah. Hello, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today. My name is Sonia, and here's a little bit more about myself. I am leading only 2 digital transformation programs at MSF. I believe in the power of technology and the benefits it can have on social impact, access to education, and other opportunities. I've been involved and dedicated to the nonprofit sector for over 15 years, and I've been focused on mindful leadership, team building, transformation, change management, diversity and inclusion, strategy, and governance. I'm also a lifelong volunteer and a modest and humble philanthropist. I recently co-founded Heroes Everywhere, a platform to celebrate unsung heroes. And finally, I genuinely consider myself extremely fortunate to have lived and worked in 3 continents in one lifetime, in Asia, North America, and now in Europe. Today, I'm going to take you on my journey on digital transformation, and hopefully this will be of learning to you, and perhaps you can take the lessons I have learned along the way and make them useful to you. So to start with, I actually began my career in the private sector. At the time, e-commerce and web portals had become very, very popular. And these were large-scale, multi-year, multi-million-dollar projects. But what I experienced in these projects was that they were grossly under-scoped and under-budgeted, which meant that the teams had to work longer, and some of us on these teams ended up having a burnout. And therefore, these projects were starting to be called death march projects. But also, we learned some key insights along the way. One of them was that it is really important to have a keen ear to what the client really wants versus what they need. And I also learned to ask questions before being asked to do something blindly and doing it blindly. And the reason was that it allowed me to take a step back and to see what was the real impact of what I was being asked to do. And this was way earlier in my career. Now, since this talk is called Stars and Scars, I have to give a score to each experience. And so, to me, this set of experiences in the early part of my career were a mixed bag of stars and scars. So moving on, I decided that the lessons that I had learned in the private sector, I wanted to take them and see how I could use them towards helping the community around me. And so I took a chance and decided that I would establish my own organization. And the premise of the organization was one thing: the effective and strategic use of technology to improve and enhance the impact of the missions of the organizations I was working with. The organization was called Anchor Works, and I was really, really deeply grateful that I got a chance to create it and run it successfully and profitably. Next, after my stint as a CEO, I decided that I would join one of my clients, which was a nonprofit client, which was a nonprofit consulting firm that helped other nonprofits with their strategic use of technology. And the 2 interesting initiatives that I would like to focus on today are youth education and an adoption agency that we work with. The context here that was common to both these fairly large organizations was that they both wanted to go paperless. They both had some manual and semi-automated processes that they wanted to transform onto a cloud-based into a cloud-based environment. And one of them actually didn't have a system at all, and the other had very old, archaic technology. And so while this was the background, and one was national within the United States, and the other was an international agency that was almost 100 years old. So what did I learn through this? one of the big things was the magic of having excellent executive buy-in. Having that backing really truly supported the success of the project from the very beginning. The other thing that I also noticed was that when you do change management really effectively, it can also work wonders. And in this case, we were dealing with users that were teachers, that were advisors, that were social workers. And so we were drastically changing their lives, day-to-day lives, from paper folders to being online on a system. And it mattered that we did it carefully and we did it diligently. And the last thing through this process was that, building up really good relationships matters, because it's like a savings bank. When things don't go well, because all transformations have problems, all projects have problems, you can actually dip into that savings account because you've got a good relationship built up. So these were some lessons I learned earlier on in the career. And while I started off telling you about, the scars that I had borne, this was a time for me to see stars, where we actually saw the sweet reward of an on-time, on-scope, and on-budget set of engagements. And so the score for it would be a star. Now, moving on, another very interesting experience that I want to share with you is one that was in the judiciary system in the United States. We were dealing with an organization that was helping people coming out of the criminal justice system and enabling them to assimilate into society by giving them life skills. Now, the premise of the business problem was the very same. Paper, semi-automated processes, many manual processes, wanting a centralized cloud-based system. Part of it did have a technology associated with it that was very old, part of it didn't. But while this seemed common, the experience here was, the learning here was a tough one. Why? Because one of the things we learned not to do was to take things as is, the way things worked as is, and try to reflect them in a transformation. So essentially what you were doing was taking broken processes and reflecting them in this new chance you were getting to transform. And that isn't something you should do, but something you should help change. There was also this natural tension, which I think several of us may have felt, the natural tension between a business department and an IT department. And we were here in between trying to get this transformation through. And that is something that you should be aware of and learn how to balance out. And the last thing is, as much as your good intentions might be there, the hard work that you're putting in, it might be sometimes wise to walk away from something that isn't working. And so in this case, we tried our best. We weren't getting that dream of on scope, on time, on budget. And so we walked away from the transformation, but we learned a lot. This was a scar. And now talking about the American Red Cross. I had the wonderful experience of being part of the International Services Division a few years ago. And here, the context was very interesting. Because it was the International Services Division, we were geographically distributed all over the world in close to 73 different countries. One of the things, and I'm sure if I asked everybody to put their hand up, they would, that we've all had problems with document management, whether it's versioning, people editing the same document at different time zones, different groups of people. We had an issue with that. Also, the types of programs that were being run were very diverse, from disaster preparedness to disaster recovery to disaster management. There were all of these different types of diverse projects that were being run. And with that sort of diversity, it was very challenging to come up with metrics that would allow us to measure the impact of all of these projects. And last but not least, what was also happening was that there was a problem with scattered storage of documents that, hand in hand with document management, there was also the storage issue. So while this was the context of the business problem, we took all of these issues and came up with a system that we established in 2014 that was successfully rolled out to 73 countries and 250 users. And the way this was done was because we actually got funding, and a funder who was very interested in us using strategically using technology to increase the impact of the mission of our work. Now, what did we learn through this? While I described the business problem to you, what I also want to share with you is that this was a system that came into being after 17 years of some attempts to get a system in place or a viable system in place. And when you have an effort that is put in after such a long time, there is a sense of user fatigue that we were facing with the users and the different departments that we were working with. We also noticed that there wasn't a dedicated team that was focusing solely on this initiative, or proper tools to run a transformation of this kind. And again, we were back to something that we'd seen before, which was this healthy tension between a business department and an IT department, and then somebody coming in between and having to make everybody come commonly towards the goal. And so what did we learn through this? You will see a lot of my messaging being very common, because that is what my ultimate recipe would be for success, and we'll get to that in a second, is that budget and funding, dedicated budget and funding matters for a transformation, because it's not trivial. Again, executive sponsorship, executive backing was great, because it really enabled us to be given the kind of political leverage needed. Change management and messaging was also very key. Who gave the message? How often did the message come? What was in the message? And the other aspect that was also important was a kind of game that we started playing, which is, if it isn't in ECOS, which is the name of the system, the activity didn't happen. And so when the management started giving out this mantra, then people started coming more towards the system. So that mattered. We also noticed that while you're trying to do a transformation and you try to create standards that people could use for their day-to-day processes, there needs to be a little bit of space for creativity, for nuances, for slightly customized processes. And that's the balance we learned to draw. Also keep in mind, because we had come in as a team that was facing people who had fatigue, we had to build our credibility. Why would we be successful when others weren't? And that mattered. And I'll explain how we could do that. And also, everything relies on the people that you're working with and the team that you're working with. So we had a set of people that were on the team. And ultimately, we also gave them a chance to grow during this transformation, which gave them incentive to do even better. And this was one of the most rewarding and the most challenging experience at the time for me. And so I'll give it a star. And so coming to Doctors Without Borders, where I am currently at MSF, I run 2 digital transformation programs. One of them is the GeoMSF program, which is a digital transformation in the use of GIS, which is Geographic Information Systems, or geospatial data, that will allow our field operations to make strategic decisions in the way they want to move forward. Now, one of the very interesting things, and I'm very happy to share this, is that just 3 weeks ago, this program went live across the global MSF movement and is currently in its little iterative releases and is being handed off to the GIS unit, which will now be built into a GIS center because of the success of this program. So I'm so happy to share this news with you, because I will give it a resounding star. And the second program that I'm currently leading is in the medical department. It is the use of electronic decision support tools in remote areas. We want to be able to give people evidence-based protocols easily available on tablets that will allow them to improve and enhance their capacity to diagnose, and also affect the way they prescribe medication. Because one of the things we also want to tackle with electronic decision support tools is the global threat of antibiotic resistance. That is currently in progress, so no score for it yet. But the overall MSF experience has again taught me the same thing. Dedicated budget, strong executive backing, and the other thing is how well defined is the case for this investment. So keep in mind, these are transformational programs, intersectional as they're called, because they're across all the operational centers. This is not mainstream normal MSF work. These are infusions of investments. So if you're going to do that, you need to have a strong case for it. And those cases are all questioned by two major questions. Is it of value to the field where we are working? And is it close to the core mission of MSF? If it's not, it needs to be revisited. So those were the things every single time that I had to keep answering. There are also political sensitivities to keep in mind, not only internal, but also external in terms of where we are working. Relationships matter because we're a huge networked organization. MSF has 40,000 strong people across the world working in different capacities. And so it's networked, and that matters. Also, because these were transformative programs, we had I have multiple governing bodies to report to: the executive body, the investment body, any other governance that I can think of right now, but lots of people to deal with and to report back to and keep satisfied. And of course, ultimately, it also matters that there is a team in place that is good, that is cohesive, collaborative. So with that, just bringing all of this information together, I wanted to share a bit of a personal motto or mantra that I try to follow. I'm not always successful, but I do try to follow it. And I say that any leader, any person in a leadership role is only as good as the team she is leading. And that matters because a large responsibility of the team cohesion is dependent on you as a leader. And the second thing is, because we are in digital transformation and we are bringing in new systems, new ways to work, these systems, these platforms and tools are only as good as the people using it. Because at the end of the day, if they're not using it, no matter how fantastic your architecture is, it's useless. So with that, I would give you a slightly other lens to keep in mind, which is three things. Know your users, because you need them to adopt and be part of this transformation. Know the organization that you're working with, the context that you're working in, because you need a highly effective change management strategy. And the last thing, as technical as it is, everything we do is dependent on information and data. And so when you're doing a transformation, it involves moving data from one way of looking at it to another way of looking at it. And that strategy matters. So with users, I call them people, because everything we do in life is about people and interactions. And so the users have to be engaged, represented, included, and available. All of that matters. In some cases, you may have a dynamic of headquarters and field. Make sure that those representatives are in these user groups that you might create. Find your champions, find your early adopters, and always have a feedback or a progress mechanism. So you're listening to people, you're taking their feedback, you're doing something about it, and you're showing them progress. Governance. As you're going, all of these transformations have a governance associated with it, people that, leaders like us have to report back to. But make sure that if it's possible and you have a way of influencing this or advising people, then have governance bodies that are empowered to make decisions and help them get criteria to make those decisions within. And also have a really healthy mix of leadership and operational teams, because they bring two different perspectives. Stakeholders, again, in addition to users and governance bodies, if there are any other stakeholders, interdepartmental or external, you need to have the right mix. And a lot of the times I have noticed that my executive leadership has helped me with trying to get the right people in place because they have more context. Last but not least, I am a big team person. Teams matter, people matter. Get people with the right skills. They don't have to be perfect. I always look at it this way: can the person grow into the role? If so, they're a perfect hire as well. So that matters. It is my responsibility as a leader to create an environment that invites, is conducive for success by making sure the morale is kept up. I pay a lot of attention to mindful leadership. I don't always succeed, but I try. I can assure you that I try. And as leaders of these transformations, it is important that we create the safety net so that our teams can work and have a collaborative and cohesive space. I've said this before, and I will keep saying it because it matters. It matters that this team is allowed to function in a successful way. With change management, I have 3 messages for you. One is around messaging. It matters that we are able to create messaging that allows users to know what's in it for them, how will it change the way they work, who is asking them to change, and are we listening to them? It's not a matter of one way, it's 2 ways. It's if you're going to change my life, are you listening to what needs to change in my life as a user, as a day-to-day worker? And in this, I've also noticed that while you can communicate, be smart about the frequency and content, and certainly try to get guidance from the people around you if you're not familiar with the organization. We mentioned this before. You need to find those people who are going to be your champions and early adopters that are, spread out across the organization, that can, start spreading awareness formally and informally. Help them foster a community. And, this community formation can be fun and interesting for them to exchange ideas and to learn from each other. And again, like I said, the feedback mechanism matters to them as well. Learning and support. While this is an obvious thing to state, it needs to be stated that while we're creating all of this, materials that will support our users to be self-sufficient must be in place. These could be webinars, these could be lunches, tutorials. You can be doing the train the trainer approach, and always show that you're accessible to your users, whether it's on-site. I don't know when we'll be on-site again, but online, remote trainings, whatever it takes to show that you're there, one phone call, one email away. Last but not least, we don't have a lot of time for this because there's a lot here, but data management considerations. Some of the things to keep in mind are, what's your volume of data? Who is using it? Why is it being collected? Is it being used? That matters as well. Look at the quality of the data so you can imagine the complexity around what would it entail to clean it up, to massage it and reformat it into your transformational platform. You will also have to consider security and access, GDPR compliance, as well as archival and backup policies. And the reason I bring this up is, while these are simple bullets, they are extremely profound, because this migration is one thing that can either sink or swim a program, because users like to see their data. They work off of information that they've been using, whichever way, in Excel, in Access, or whatever other database they may have, old database or new database. And if you're going to change the way they work, they need access to that information. And if it's done well, it builds your credibility and it helps with user adoption as well. So, final recipe for success. There needs to be a proper need for this organizational change and transformation. There needs to be definitely allocated budget and support from the top. An effective change management strategy that continues and evolves throughout the program, user engagement throughout the program, and you building credibility as a team or a person or a lead. You must have tools and processes in place to run such initiatives. This means whether you know where your documents are going to be stored, what project management tool you're going to use, etc. These are all things that matter and save time. Sensible planning, so you are not creating emergencies with other people or burning your team out. and having a skilled team with both internal members as well as good, strong external solution providers, and leading with empathy, creating a safety net as mentioned before, being collaborative and cohesive, and that will help you see your stars. And so with that, I hand it off to you, Kelly, and I'll stop the share. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. This is, so it was really fun working on, I'm just trying to get my share up here now, because we practiced this all night last night. So now I'm just like, let's see if we can do it, right? Share. While we see the slide. Hey, do you see it? Yeah, that's fun. So it was really fun working with Sonia on this presentation, because after I saw what she put together, and there's a question in the chat. I think, does digital look the same for NGOs or for the private sector? And I can't say to the exact process. I would say it's quite different, but I could take out the NGO part of what Sonia is saying and put in private sector, and it would be the same presentation with different images. And I thought that was really fascinating. And Sonia and I had talked about this a lot before, about just how similar the processes are. The audiences might be different, and the goals in some way are different, but really the steps that you go through and what's important, and what Sonia's highlighted that were success factors, or created stars or scars for learning, are really a lot of the same points that make or break initiatives and successful transformation projects in the private sector. So before we dive into a few areas, for those of you who don't know me or I haven't been able to meet you yet, I just wanted to give a quick presentation. I also feel very fortunate to have worked across many different continents, only 2 for me. But well, no, that's not true, 3. I worked in South America also, but really feel very fortunate to be in Europe. I'm American, I'm a native Californian, and anyone who's been to California probably sees that bridge. So I am from San Francisco, and I think that little image of me is quite representative. I love technology, as Sonia does, and I believe in the power of it. I love social media, I love connecting. So please, after this presentation, feel free to connect if we're not connected. I also love coffee, and that coffee fuels my energy every day. I have a husband and 2 teen daughters, so I keep myself up to speed, and those little beans are representing my family. And as Sarah so kindly introduced before, I also have a very big heart for community building and not-for-profit. So helping out the initiatives, the smaller organizations that might not have funding, entrepreneurs and startups, and I do that in various different ways. Women in Digital is one of them. Community building through Community Works is another. And then when we can meet in person, I also do something called Drop-in Digital that's on Saturdays, and it's coffee and croissant and just talking about whatever entrepreneurs need to get started. And well, hopefully that'll start again so we can participate in that. So I kind of want to take a step back from what Sonia was saying and apply a different lens of some learnings through initiatives that I've worked at and worked on. And one of them that I want to talk about is an initiative, a digital transformation initiative for Sunstar, where I'm at, that I've been leading since 2016. Or I was actually asked to join the company as an independent marketing consultant to kind of sort out how Sunstar Europe and their 7 affiliates could tackle this just enormous and overwhelming topic of digital transformation. And I think one thing that I learned early on, because the initiative took many different forms, and some of them started smaller. And the one thing I learned is, in order to achieve it, you need to believe it. But the first place you need to start is dreaming it. And you have to dream really, really big to make transformation happen within organizations. And I truly believe that the change doesn't come incrementally. And we know that people love progress, but they hate change. And this is something that someone very wise, who works at Swisscom actually, said to me when I met him a few years ago. I asked him for 3 tips, and this is one of them. And he said, you need to know this. Change is not easy, and we know that, but I think part of the trick to motivating people into change is understanding the fear and what gets them to move. And I think of it often as, if I want to get my teen girls to clean up their room, like dangling a carrot at the end of the stick literally is not going to work. But if I tell them I'm going to the store and getting ice cream sundaes, and it's going to be a huge ice cream sundae fest after they clean their rooms, that's big, and they go for it. And what I mean with that is you just can't motivate incremental change with kind of a meh outcome. And that's really important as we move forward. And that's where the dreaming big comes in. And if I tie that back to where we are at Sunstar, this was a European operation that before 2018 had no marketing technology in place. 7 affiliates, they're a world leader in oral care. And all of the technology, there was no marketing technology or databases owned in Europe. And digital went about as far as Facebook, and then some sites that were run by agencies. And besides that, each one of the affiliates, it worked very decentralized. There was no centralized organization or communication. It was really, they launched products, they had a product development team that would send out the information, communication, and each market could do what they wanted, and they were doing fine. But we knew that times were changing. And if you can imagine to get, teams across Europe who have never had to coordinate really with headquarters, all of a sudden give up a lot of what they're doing to centralize, you have to sell in a big dream. I mean, you have to really make it worthwhile. And without that, I don't think that you can really quite motivate people to move the direction that you want. Now, I think to Sonia's point, when she's talking about know your users and know what's important, you have to spend a lot of time really listening and talking to them. Because at the end, the truth is no one will give maximum effort for a really small result. So you have to sell it big, and you really have to be a cheerleader, a great salesperson. But even more than that, you have to be a dreamer, because you need to get people to buy in. And so that was one thing that I learned, and it didn't always start out with the big dream. I learned along the way I couldn't get people to step in. So I took my California crazy and I wore it well. I put that, I put that flag, I flew that flag high. And I just pulled off the fact that, we do things differently in California, and I led that march. And we got everyone to dreaming so big that we were able to achieve what we set forth. So at the end of last year, we finally did receive confirmation of our results through web traffic and conversions, and even we received an award. Oh, I don't know if you can see it. Award for marketing technology within the organization. That this was this initiative has been recognized globally as really a way forward. So I would say that that's a big star. And what I mean with achieving and really dreaming big is the Achieve initiative was really 4 steps. So if you look at this, you can see that this was not a small feat. So when we talk about dreaming big, it was outlined in very simple, clear, and concise steps, and planned, but it was a huge, huge activity. And you can imagine people were scared along the way. Which brings me to the next point of being scared. I think that the truism of change coming is that we all have to hopefully not die, but we have to adapt. And that was a second piece of advice that someone gave me, was adapt or die. You will lose people along the way. There will be team members who just say, this is not for me. And you have to know to let them go. And but if you have a plan and you have a vision, then you'll carry them along, and you'll find your advocates, and you'll find the ones that want to move forward with you. But the key to that, again, is understanding your users and the what's in it for me, because this is what everybody wants to know. They understand all of the touch points. They understand the concept of where you're going. But at the end of the day, they still need to know what's in it for me, because what they see in the beginning is a lot of effort packed on top of their daily jobs. You know, it's not incremental. It's not a 10% change. It's not 20%. It might be 50% or 60% of new work and process work and working towards this goal that they're taking on top of what they're already doing, which is a lot, right? So here, I think what we said, oops, in the beginning, when I started working on this project and leading it, it wasn't a hit. I don't think I did a very good job at communicating to all of the audiences what was in it for them and understanding how that they participated. And it wasn't just the users, the usual suspects. It was also what's in it for finance, what's in it for IT, what's in it for marketing. Everybody needed to know how this was going to affect them. And so I have to say in the beginning, it was a rocky start. It's an area where I could have done a lot better communicating. I thought the plan was enough, and it wasn't. And I think that a lot of this had to do with the empathy part, where I find myself very empathetic, but maybe not understanding what every stakeholder needed to know. So I gave myself a scar on this. So how do you turn that around? And how do you get people to really understand, especially in marketing, if we're talking about delivering these experiences to the outside world, and we have to understand what's important for them? Well, we need to know that all of these experiences and the beauty, especially when we talk about customer experience, it is just like beauty, and it radiates from the inside out. And this goes to Sonia's point of, we have to really put a lot of focus on our teams internally and empowering them and giving them the tools they need in order to deliver these amazing experiences. It could be in terms of process. Do they have access to their data? Do they have the modern tools that they need? I mean, we all see that. How many of us go into an organization and, you know, it's awesome. I have my iPhone and I love it. And then I get to work and I have to set the clock back 20 years and use some antiquated system. How am I ever going to be able to provide amazing experiences to my customers or professionals if the tools we have aren't even up to par? So I think that this is something that we need to think about, not only in terms of empowerment, but what are those tools that we're using? Because we're very focused on the meeting those customer expectations, but we also have internal customers that we need to please as well. And one part of really working on that experience and that motivation of change and providing those tools is also through the educational path. And Sonia pointed this out as well. Really, the adoption of transformation and how you move forward, it's very much tied to how well you can empower. What type of education can you bring to your users? And it starts organically, and you don't even need a large learning and development organization within the company. You start organically making these assets and putting together what you need to help motivate that change. And this ultimately turns into some really nice learning opportunities for other regions in your organization, but also your teams. And we have to really be quite scrappy, I think, in terms of how we pull together the content we need and how we motivate. And one way is really just wrapping your arms around the stakeholders and bringing them into that creation process of empowering one another and learning how to use the tools, train the trainer. Sonia talked about, these are some ideas and some programs that we have in place in Sunstar that have worked really, really well. And I think to sum it up here, in the organizations that are spending time and focusing on the learning and the development and the enablement and the people part of transformation, they'll get out of it what they give. And I think that that's just it's a truism that if we're not investing in our teams, do not expect a lot out of them. So what turned out as a scar ultimately turned into a star. And I think that it's really nice. And for me, it was, there were some rocky times along the way. And I think that there's also that message that you can navigate a different way. Nothing is set in stone. If you see it's not on track, sit down with your team and you can really get it to the direction that you want to go. Yes, so that was revised. my animation in there. And the third point, and this kind of goes into getting buy-in, and buy-in means budget and dedicated resources. I'm a firm believer that we need to brand our initiatives. No transformation initiative will ever be successful if everybody's talking about just parts of it. If they're talking about the technology, or if they're talking about just a data part, you need to brand it as something larger than life. For the transformation across Europe, we called it Achieve, because that word, to me, it carried a weight of its own. Everybody knew exactly where we were going. We were going to achieve something. And so the branding was a huge part of the success. What we did here was everywhere we went, every time we had a presentation, every time we talked about Achieve, we had the same visual. So there are ways that you can create this. We didn't have branding in terms of an agency. Every presentation started with the same 5 slides. I must have presented and the team over 200 times, always the same 5 slides. Everybody knew what Achieve was. Everyone recognized this girl, or maybe she was giving the muscle this way, but it was really a part of the brand. It was something inspiring and something that we could somehow, without putting words to it, also relate to, because we all dream of something greater and bigger and achieving. And this was a huge part of the success. I mean, it really helped us create, not create a sense of purpose, but create a sense of purpose. And this led to also management buy-in of this larger initiative. Why are we investing? We're investing in something big in the future. And it also really gave us a way to talk about an overarching program that had many different tracks. And really tie it together. And that's very important when you're managing large-scale programs, to be able to communicate around one program and then all of the individual projects in between. So think about a brand and a brand name and how you could sculpt that into your next initiative. And then just to follow up, I think, and close, what I've learned over the last 4 years is, I used to call it an initiative. It definitely wasn't a project. Transformation is never a project. There's no end date. And now I believe it's not really an initiative either. It's truly a mindset within the organization that we need to inspire this change and people to believe, to dream big. We need to build the dream, and the budget will come, the buy-in will come. If you're convinced, you can convince others. If you're not convinced, get someone in there who can convince others. You might have the idea, but not be the person to go out and bang that drum. Team with someone who can. And I think, and I know Sonia feels the same, the most important of all of this is it's not the technology, it's not all the coolness that's going to come out of it. Yes, we're going to impact people, be it in the nonprofit world or the for-profit, but it's really focusing on that team first and that culture. We need to connect, and we need to build this sense of community internally to be able to make these great things happen. And I think that was something that I didn't really think about in the beginning, but this continuous learning culture and this team first, it's this bank that you can dip into when things go bad, or you can generously share when things are going well. It's so important, the relationships. And the one thing, because it is a whole other topic along with data too, is the KPIs. I think it's really difficult still today. We can talk about the vision and why we need to do things, and management, they want to know, how are you going to measure it? And the KPIs are not always easy to nail down. And it's really just something you need to do with the teams also. But without setting your KPIs and how you measure success, it's really, you have a rough road. So I would say overall, it's a star, and transformation and change for me is always a star. And yeah, that's it. I think we're ready to open up and answer questions and hear feedback, and thanks. And I know I can speak on behalf of Sonia. I threw this in here that we both would love to connect. So if we're not connected, then come meet us on LinkedIn.
So first of all, thank you for everything. It was a great presentation. I was impressed by both of you. And so we have the Q&A phase now. Some question you already answered, Sonia, to the questions. And at the same time, Kelly, you already answered of one of the questions in the chat. Then it was the difference between no profit and a private sector. So let's move on another question. Any web training to advise in regards with digital transformation? Yeah.
Web training, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
You mean like on demand? Yeah. So, okay. So there are a lot of organizations that, so we work with Adobe. I'll put it here. Adobe has something called the Experience League, and you can go to the Experience League. You just need an Adobe ID, so you can sign up for free. And you have access to a lot of different business topics on transformation. Gartner and McKinsey both have an amazing catalog of video and also I would say like print resources to move that forward. I think in terms of transformation itself, how do you motivate transformation? I think it's difficult. I don't think I've ever seen a course so much on how do we move forward, but I would say the one of the first places to really move forward is understand the needs and the desires. And I think Sonia probably agrees to that too. And I think that's where the first place, that's where you first begin. And then I think depending on which area that takes or which shape, you can always find those support resources online to help you maybe better plan a roadmap or better piece things together or better understand a topic. I don't know. What do you say, Sonia?
No, I completely agree with you. I was just going to say life has been my experience and training in all of this. So it's good. It's good that you gave them the example of Adobe. I also think that there are a lot of good thought articles that have been put out by the McKinseys, the Deloittes, and other organizations that, large scale consulting organizations that can describe all of these to you. But whatever training you take, at the end of the day, it is completely dependent on the context that you're working in, the organization that you're working in, and whose vision is it for this transformation? Who's going to support it and back it up? So I think that matters a lot.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you, Kelly. You have so many questions, and we just can take a few minutes for each question. So how have you managed cross-division change management? So this probably is for Sonia. I assume this project came with a certain change to internal culture. Thank you. Well, we discussed already a little bit, but please.
Okay, thank you for that. So the biggest thing we had to sell in order for this to work was the value add of the transformation. Keep in mind, this is, if I give you the MSF example, this is hard-earned money. We don't depend on governments. We depend on private donors largely. And so every bit of money that came through to fund this transformation needed to be justified as to why the change is taking place. And I think the cross-divisional culture ended up being successful because we went on a, literally, I would call it like a marketing campaign. We had to go around talking to people, explaining them why we're doing this and why is it good for them and why we were the right set of people to make this successful. So after that selling, we had to now put actions to those words. And so we met our deadline and we came within budget, and that continued to build our credibility throughout the 3 years that at least the GMSF program went live with.
That's a great point, Sonia. I'm just going to jump in there. I think on these large initiatives, the most important thing is when that first date that you set, you must meet it. The minute that runs over, you've blown all of the credibility in the work, and we did that. And I'm just going to segue, if you don't mind, into a question from Jeanette on how do you work with partners and make this successful. And I think this is one area where we were very successful with our partner on this. We have a few different partners. We have EBI, we have HESI, we have Isobar, and I know that there's a representative for each one of these partners here, and that's also like the likability and trust thing. We all work together, so we support one another. But it's a really great point. You bring them in the fold. If you can only be as successful as the team you work with and the partners you collaborate with, and you need to be brutally transparent with them. You need to share everything, the budget, your fears, your stakeholders that are detractors, everything, and you need to set that date, and everybody needs to have that date.
Yes, failure was not an option actually in some of our cases. You don't use the word failure, but it was not an option. And in the case of the Red Cross, for example, one of the things we did was we did a little pilot, and within 4 months of the team getting formed, we showed them something. So they could touch and feel and say, ah, it's no longer a dream, it's actually something taking shape. So that matters as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Bite-sized, like, bite-sized chunks, MVPs. Don't dig down for a year and come back. Like, you need to have short timelines. It's agile, it's iterative, and you need to show things. You need to keep it going. And your team needs to see that too.
Yes.
Nobody has the patience to, we're not back in 1992. Nobody has the patience to wait a year to see anything.
To do waterfalls anymore.
Yeah. And there's a question from Joanne. Do you see digital transformation being more crucial or critical? Sorry, Sarah, I'm taking your job.
Yeah, don't worry.
Now with the situation we're in, get on it. It's not too late. But yes, I mean, it's very possible. Who knows when this is over and new habits have been built? Our online habits will be forever changed. So it will not be too late. All organizations need to be meeting customers, users, field workers where they are, and digital is the key to reaching them.
Okay, we just have like a few minutes, so let's take up one more question and then we arrive to the closing round. So there was a question that you already answered, so we will let it go. Then it's about Agile. I think then the first question about change management, somehow you already answer or give some indication on how to convince it if there is no time and no budget. And then we pass to the KPI part. So how to get the management to understand in the KPI that team happiness and self-organization is so important.
Wow.
Yeah. 20 minutes just for this question, but you just have
tune in January for our next conversation about KPIs. Yeah, that's it's go ahead, Sonia.
No, so it's like somebody trying to sell the fact that Bhutan, the country Bhutan, has gross national happiness as its indicator. And so here your question is extremely mindful. You're saying, can we put team happiness as an indicator? And I have never done that. I have fought for it. I have diligently protected my team, but it has never been an indicator. And I think I will use it next time to see, where our morale is. And how do you convince them? I think this is a change that needs to take place generally, because it is not a reflection of, I think it's a reflection of leadership versus management. Management is doing things right. Leadership is doing the right thing. And I think doing the right thing is trying to see whether your people are satisfied and happy with the way they're working and what they're doing. And I haven't really done it, but I would like to keep championing this cause. So don't have an answer, but hopefully. Kelly, you were going to say something. You were on mute.
No, I was talking to a colleague because I'm at work.
Sorry.
I was on mute. I was just like, I was seeing who can read lips.
Okay.
No, so, thanks to everyone. Yeah.
First of all, thank you so much. We don't have any more time to answer questions. I really, really want to thank Sonia and Kelly, because that was like an incredible meetup. I am glad that I was part of it. I've learned so much. Stay tuned. Because to everybody, because obviously there are new meetup coming up. There is a super great meetup that is coming up in December, and it will discuss about like career development. So in 2021, it will be a reflection. So really, really important for, I think, everybody joining today also to go to this meetup, because career development is like everybody. I mean, it's part of us, so it's super important to join too. So again, thank you so much to the speaker. Thank you so much for everybody to joining this this meetup. And as I can see, everybody love it. They are like writing fantastic presentation. Thank you, Sonia and Kelly, great session. So you did a great job. Now you know it. It's official.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Kelly, Rafaela, and Simone. Really, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you to everybody.
Thank you. Nice to see you all.
Bye.
And thanks a lot. Thank you, Sonia.
Bye.
Thank you,
Kelly.
Stay safe, everybody. Stay safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Cheers.